Well, hello. Welcome to VUSM 100. I will be sending out every week a hopefully short video narrative of what we should have gotten out of week one, what it's kind of about, a summary, and briefly talk about how it's connected to the course outcomes, and then, of course, the following or the preceding week as well. So hopefully this won't be super creepy. I'm not a fan of listening to myself, but I found that students do like, especially in an online course, at least something other than just the reading. So with that said, let's just talk a little bit about the purpose of the course. If you are a regular full-time student at Viterbo, you are to complete 4 courses, which we call our mission seminar courses. And they typically are taking your freshman, sophomore, junior, and senior year in order. Franciscan Values, this course, Living in a Diverse World, the 200s, Serving the Common Good, the 300s, and Living the Ethical Life, the 400s. This is quite unique to Viterbo. Most universities don't require something like this. There are some private, especially Catholic universities, that require some religious work. This is a bit different than that, in that these are not religious per se. They are not a course on Catholicism, but it is what we like to say are thinking courses. They're courses to help frame what we believe are important values. And a value is something that is lived, not thought of, but it's what you actually do is the true definition of a value. We believe are important values that will help better promote the mission of Viterbo University, which is to graduate whatever your program is in that you will be a servant leader and an ethical leader. And that's what we believe here at Viterbo, and we believe that these courses help in engaging in that contemplation of how that fits into your career and how you want to live your life. So many don't have to take all 4 because of the way they've come in the university, or through a transfer student, or through the School of Adult Education or something similar to that. But oftentimes most have to take at least this first course, which is VUSM 100, Franciscan Values and Traditions. So you know that every course is taught, all the VUSMs are taught by faculty throughout the university in varying disciplines. I am not a theologian. I am not an expert on St. Francis or Franciscan values for that matter. I'm a marketing professor. My research and specialty is in social media. But all the professors at the university do take on these courses and teach it through the lens of their discipline. So this course, though you don't have to be a business major nor a marketing major, will be taught through the lens of marketing/business in a very general way. So we'll be able to apply the concepts of VUSM 100, Franciscan values, through this lens. And it's actually quite easy because the course is kind of in 2 parts. One, it looks at the life of St. Francis, the historical life of St. Francis, which is the textbook that you have that's required, but it also is going to introduce you to the 5 Franciscan values, or at least the 5 values of Viterbo that we've adopted based on what we know are Franciscan values. And again, value is something that you live and that you do. That would be hospitality, service, integrity, stewardship, and contemplation. Each week we will be exploring each one of those a little bit, starting next week, a little bit more in depth, and we will then link that to modern day business/marketing concepts. And again, you don't need to know anything about that content area. We will just look at it through that lens. So if we look at right now just the readings, they really focused on the early life of St. Francis. And what's important is for you to understand the time and the context in which St. Francis grew up in. He grew up in the medieval times, and during that time, life in Europe, in Italy, was kind of like a caste system. There were kind of the folks that had means, and everybody else was pretty poor, peasants, almost serfs. Growing up in Assisi, which is in the Umbria region, it's about 2.5 hours northeast of Rome, in a place that looks actually quite like the Cooley region. I've been to Assisi before, and it is similar to this area in that there's some hills, and in between the hills there's a relatively large flat area that was used for farming. Assisi actually is on top of a hill, and people that lived with wealth lived on top of the hill, and those that did not lived at the bottom. The main reason was because of their plumbing. Everything ran downhill. All the sewage and the wastewater would just simply go downhill as they threw it out the windows and into the streets. And so those that had means lived on the top of the hill, and those did not, for obvious reasons, lived on the bottom. St. Francis grew up with some means. His dad was a pretty successful cloth merchant, and because of his business, he actually traveled quite a bit. So St. Francis did not have a father figure around a lot in that his dad was always out on business. So he was around his mother a lot, Pica, and was influenced quite a bit by her. She was a devout Catholic, and that, I believe, gave St. Francis a good underpinning of his understanding of the importance of religion. With that said, St. Francis, again, if we would connect him to something similar to today's time, he was a kid basically of wealth who had a lot of stuff going for him. He was charismatic, good-looking, athletic. So you could say he was kind of like the high school quarterback and prom king. He kind of had all of those advantages and used those advantages. He was quite the party boy, and oftentimes would wake up in the morning feeling not so good about the choices he made, guilty. Yet he continued to do this, and over time it became kind of bothersome to him. Back in this time, in the medieval times, people of wealth, the men, young men at this time, were groomed to be knights, and that's what St. Francis was trying to do, is become a knight. And he dreamt about being a knight, and he thought that was the most important thing in the world because of all the fame and the fortune that came along with being a knight. And as he started to develop this passion, he went to go to battle to a neighboring town, and on the way stopped and had a dream, and that dream told him, St. Francis, you need to change your ways. This is not what you should be doing. And he took him and his servant, turned around, and never went to the battle and came back. And this was the start of a lot of you'll find in the text, and as we learn more, a lot of these dreams that St. Francis had have really been conversions because he listened to the voices. And that's going to be a main theme in our discussions and cases this week, is listening to voices. So St. Francis listened to this voice, returned, and was starting this discernment of what was the meaning of his life. The biggest conversion he had, of course, was his praying to the San Damiano cross. It's a cross that is colored and figured a little bit differently than a traditional cross. If you're on the Viterbo campus, you'll see it in every single room in every building at Viterbo is the San Damiano cross. And St. Francis prayed to this cross, and he had a vision, and the vision was for him to turn his life around and to rebuild the church. And that's exactly what he started to do in his early life. St. Francis, again, was in his, as best we know, his early 20s when this conversion was starting to happen, late teens. And chapters 1 through 2 basically walk us through that path. As I said, everybody teaches this course through its own lens. The lens of this course is through marketing and business, and in the casework and in the discussions, you'll see how we're trying to weave that into the foundations of the coursework here. Additionally, you should also recognize that Viterbo University was founded in the 1800s by some nuns who came by way of Germany, who were, as you'll find out later in this course, St. Francis had a fairly important woman in his life beyond his mother Pica, but St. Clare, and then of Assisi, and then St. Rose of Viterbo, who took on St. Francis's work and developed some of their own orders, and as now we know are the Franciscan Sisters of Perpetual Adoration, the FSPA. They came from Germany and then to Milwaukee, and then from Milwaukee to La Crosse to start a school to help educate and take care of, nurse the residents. That out of that grew, Viterbo College, and then now Viterbo University. And they still are the sponsors of the university, the FSPA. On campus, there's still many that live and are involved in the life of Viterbo, and actually have been praying perpetually for over 100 years for the community and for Viterbo students. So we respect and we honor their tradition, and that's also one of the points of this class is to give note to the historical foundations of the university. Again, this is not a religious course per se. St. Francis was, in fact, a real human being, a historical figure. You need to determine his saintliness. I will not make you believe that he's a saint. You don't have to believe in Catholicism, Christianity at all to understand the historical importance of St. Francis and how his teachings have affected many, and then you could argue have given rise to universities like Viterbo and the works that the people do through Viterbo University. But what you do need to understand is the values that are important to the university. You don't have to believe in them or believe they're important, but they are important to the university, and that's what this course will focus on, are the traditions of St. Francis and the effect that he's had through his life.